Hey there, my friends. Mary Rose here on a Wednesday. And it's just been a really funny day for me with technology. So I don't know if you guys saw that I actually popped on screen for a hot second before I meant to. And our theme today is, how do you know that you're ready to begin? So I'm very amused by this because I think it's quite appropriate. Before we pop in, let me just remind anybody who's watching on Facebook, please go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and give permission to show your name. This way I know who's leaving the comment. I love it when we have conversations in the comments. Your questions are very, very welcome. So I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author. I write all kinds of books. I'm probably best known for my middle grade titles, but my writing students many are writing kid lit, but many are not. So everything I talk about here applies whether you're writing books for young readers, books for old readers, or books for people who just love a good story. That's actually how I think of my ideal reader. I'm also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own platform for training writers, mentoring writers, creating community, and helping writers save time. We don't have to go it alone. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot that can be learned about story structure and writing craft. And if you have the right training and the right mentorship, you are going to achieve your goals so much faster than if you're just trying to figure out on your own. So if you want to know more about Path of the Storyteller, you can just visit the website, www.pathofthestoryteller.com, get on the mailing list, and all your questions shall be answered. So let me open up the comments, see who's here. Please say hi if you're watching live. If you're watching on the replay, you can always leave a comment below, especially if you have a question. I love to answer them. So our topic today, as so many of our best topics have been, is actually a suggestion from one of our followers who laid out quite clearly a question that I actually have heard a lot, and I know it's something that writers really, really think about and struggle with sometimes, which is, how do you know that you've figured out enough about your story to actually begin drafting the book? It seems like it shouldn't be hard to know this, but in practice, it is not easy to figure out. Let me wave hi to Mie, to Terry, to Nancy. I'm so glad you guys are here. I look forward to hearing your questions as we go on. Please leave a comment. Do you also sometimes struggle with knowing whether or not it's time to put that metaphorical fresh sheet of blank paper in the metaphorical typewriter and type chapter 1? It was a dark and stormy night, or however you want to get your story started. If this is you, just know that you're not alone, because there is a quality of storytelling that is energetic, as I've talked about in the past. When we think of a story, we don't immediately think of the physical manifestation of that story. We don't necessarily think of all the words on all those pages, right? We think of what? We think of the feeling that story gave us. We think of the main character. We think of all they went through. We think of the funny parts. We think of the love story and how it made us feel. We think of the excitement of finding out who done it. We think of the tale. We think of the ineffable thing called story. And it's so marvelous to contemplate how enduring this immaterial energetic substance of story really is, because you can take a story that's been around for a long time. One favorite example of mine is Pinocchio, because Pinocchio, started as a tale written in Italian. It was translated, it found its way. But the character of Pinocchio is today continues to be one of the most recognizable characters and the most adapted. There have been every conceivable retelling of Pinocchio. Many fairy tales are like this as well. It doesn't matter if you write them in a book, put them in a graphic novel, convert them into an animated film, a live action film, a Broadway musical, a modern dance, a ballet. You can take the same story and tell it and tell it and tell it and tell it, and it's still recognizably that story. So there's a funny threshold to cross when you think of it that way. You realize that to get from this energetic quality of story that's in your head to the actual putting it on paper, building it out of words, this is a big shift from the energetic to the material, right? From lack of substance to actual substance. We're bringing something into being. It's one of the reasons that I call my course in writing craft manifestations, because that is in fact what we do when we take that, butterfly of story energy from our imaginations and sit down to start typing words, and we're thinking about sentences now and punctuation marks and where to break the paragraph. All of a sudden it gets very concrete. So we are understandably a little bit like breathless with anxiety to cross that threshold, right? To just cross the threshold into a physical manifestation. So, how do we get the courage to cross the threshold? Well, I want to talk about a few things that you might need to know, that you would be wise to know in my experience, my vast experience, to be honest, before you cross the threshold into putting that gorgeous, perfect, full of infinite potential story that's in your head into the clumsy, gravity, laden thing of a first draft, an imperfect, messy first draft that is going to disappoint you the moment you begin creating it. Can I hear an amen? All right. So I think one of the first things that we need to have is good cheer and a humorous an understanding of what I just described, which is if your expectation is once you start to write, the thing that you write is the story, is the book, you are immediately going to have a crisis, because you are comparing your not even your first draft, your zero draft, right? Draft zero. Your just first explorations, your first attempts to, just put your fingers on a keyboard and just see if you can make a few words come out. You are mistakenly comparing that to the perfect, finished, polished, edited, copy edited, proofread, illustrated, bound between hardcovers, finished product that lines the bookshelves, right? There are countless miles of effort and concentration and application of craft that separate those 2 points on the journey. Can you get to that beautiful goal line from where you are today? You absolutely can. But you must have a realistic expectation of what that journey is like. So the first thing that you actually must have before you begin the writing journey, the writing part, the manifesting part of this, is realistic expectations, a lot of patience, a lot of understanding of what process is like. Otherwise, what's going to happen? You're going to put words down on the page, and they are immediately going to mock you with their imperfection, and you'll freeze up and you'll say, this is terrible. I don't know what I'm doing. I never should have begun. I don't like it. I have no talent. Like, you can cycle into a lot of mindset issues, even just writing a tiny bit. So that is the number one thing, my friends. It's really so important. The other things I'm going to talk about really do have to do with writing craft. They're quite practical and specific, but I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to begin the process of writing with an extreme sense of playfulness. You are a kid in a sandbox making messy mud pies, you are just playing. So this is not about having finished product just yet. So now, in a more practical sense, Chances are, if you're interested in this topic of how do I know when to begin, you have a little seedling of an idea of some kind, a setting, a story, a title, a feeling. There's something, maybe you read something that inspired you. You wish, oh, that's, XYZ is my favorite book. I wish I could write something like that, sort of like me loving Charlotte's Web so much and saying to myself, someday I really want to write my own sort of 21st century tale of friendship and salvation on a farm, as E.B. White said. And so I did. That's a seed that can be planted even before you have a character or a plot. Sometimes you can just have a longing to write a certain kind of story. All of these are perfectly valid. But once you have that seed, you need something else. First thing you need is what I call the hero. You need a main character. You need somebody to whom the story is happening, not only happening to, but rises from. When I say the story rises from the hero, I mean that quite literally. There is no story unless there is a hero who needs a change, who needs transformation, who's ready to go on some literal or metaphoric journey of transformation. That is what a story is. So without that hero, who's going to go on a journey of change? What needs to change? Now, I have sometimes joked with my students that you don't read too many books where the main character is a mountain. There are the odd exceptions. Occasionally someone will write a book with a tree as the main character. That has happened. But these tend to be sentient trees, trees that are anthropomorphized in some way. We can certainly write books that have animals as characters. These books can be wonderfully imagined and profound. But think about it for a minute. Even if the hero is wearing the mask of somebody that's not a human being, we authors are human and our readers are human. And we might be using a character who's a hobbit or a rabbit or a tree to tell a story. But the story that we tell cannot help but be about what it means to be human. So I'm just going to say person for now, but just know that when I say person, maybe you've got something else in mind, but you need a hero in a predicament of some kind. And that predicament, that need for change, that readiness to go on the great adventure of their lives, and whether that adventure is a physical adventure, a spiritual adventure, a psychological adventure, doesn't matter. It's still an adventure. It's still leaving a stasis, a stuckness, a situation that has run its course, something that is just one straw short of the last straw, and getting through that threshold into the uncomfortable experiences outside the comfort zone, far outside the realm of what is ordinary for this character, so that they can have, for the reader's great pleasure and benefit, a journey of transformation filled with obstacles that make them grow and change and get to the end of the road different than they were at the beginning. So if that is my definition of a story, and it is, then how can that happen without a hero? So even if your seed of inspiration feels like it came from, I want to write a book set in Rome, or I want to write an homage to Charlotte's Web, or even if it comes from some other place, please come up with a hero before you get too committed to sitting down and saying, today I'm going to draft chapter 1. If you don't have a character, that chapter is going to be what? Pages of scenery? It's not going to get you too far. Now, is it wrong to sit and write pages of scenery? Absolutely not. You can do what artists do. You are an artist, but when I say that visual artists, you can do what visual artists do and keep sketchbooks. You can write descriptions, you can gather sensory detail, you can go on a trip to a place and you think, oh, I would love to use this as a setting for a story someday, and just write pages and pages of notes and description and just take it all in and put it into words, snap photos, make a scrapbook. That kind of gathering of shiny objects is very much part of the way writers see the world. And you must indulge yourself. If you are at a cafe and you overhear a really interesting conversation, stick it in your scrapbook, stick it in your writer's notebook. You may get ideas from it. You may want to refer to these things later. So that's not what I mean when I say don't start without a hero. If you're note taking, if you're just having fun in the gathering of shiny objects phase, as I call it, that's fine. What I'm talking about is that now I'm going to start the book. Today is day one. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Don't get to day one without some sense of who the main character is and what's wrong. They may not know what's wrong. They may be in denial about what's wrong. They may be pretending nothing's wrong. But the situation that your main character is in at the beginning of your story is a house of cards, whether they can tell or not. And something is going to very, very quickly come along to topple it, because that's how stories begin. So first thing is you need a hero. So what's the second thing you need before you actually sit down to start your book, your novel? I mentioned setting, places. This may not apply to every story. However, if you're writing a story that is set in a place you don't know well, or a place that you are inventing, as many fantasy novels are set, or a period of time that requires research, if you're writing something set in the past, a historical novel, or maybe you're writing sci-fi set in the future. If there's something that is not self-evident about the setting, you probably need to have enough research under your belt, enough of a sketch about the setting that you can begin. And why do I say that? If you write a book set in Victorian England, as I did, the entire 6-book series of The Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place is set in Victorian London and some other locations. If you don't know anything about the period, if you don't know how people travel, if you don't know what the social customs were at the time, if you don't know what the technology was, if you don't know whether or not there was electricity, if you don't know, how people behave, what the gender roles were, what the economic roles were, you are not going to get but a sentence or two in before you hit the wall of your own knowledge. You have to know something. You have to have a sense of the environment. Do you have to be an expert? No. A historian? No. You don't have to. You can look things up as you go along. But you must have a basic sense of the world, because your hero does not exist in a vacuum. And everything you invent for your book, if it has a kind of an interesting setting, not a completely contemporary reality-based setting, is going to require some level of detail. You can fill it in more later, you can make it more specific later, but you're going to be lost if you haven't done some research. This is the kind of situation where the realities of the story are going to be one of the great writing prompts that you have, because that setting, that unusual setting, is going to keep feeding you ideas for what your hero has to do next, what tests they might encounter, what kind of characters they might encounter, right? You don't have to plan all that in advance, but without some sense of the world of the book, you really will be trying to invent in a very dry landscape. So do some research if needed. All right, here's the third thing. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to check for questions. You guys are busy in the comments and I love it. Here's the third thing that I want you to think about making some decisions about before you actually sit down to write. Point of view. Okay, don't freak out. Yes, point of view is not set in stone. You can write a couple of chapters in the first person and then say, I'm making a mistake. This book really belongs in the third person. Will that ruin your career? Will it destroy your future? No, no, no. Everyone's done this. We've all started books at one point of view and then decided, this isn't really what I meant. I bring it up because it's so common to begin a book without carefully considering what point of view you want to use and then having to go back and redo it, that I just encourage you to think about it before you start. Now, the question of how to choose which point of view to use, that's a whole session. That's a whole hour on a Wednesday, and we'll do that. We will do that for sure. And I think I've talked about point of view in the past. You can check out some of the other videos on the YouTube channel. There's one particularly about point of view. But we think about point of view endlessly, and we should. Why? Because it actually does not just have to do with what pronoun we use throughout the book. It's not the difference between reader, I married him, and, Bilbo got on his pony and went traveling. That's part of how it's expressed. That's how it's manifested. But it has more to do with the scope of what the book is going to contain as well. Is the book going to be very locked into one character's lived experience, their memories, what information and conversations they have access to, or does it need to be more expansive? You are starting to get a feel, like you're getting a little bit of a feel for the story you want to tell. It's going to affect what point of view you begin with. The sooner you get your point of view locked in, the sooner you can get your voice locked in. And so I'm going to offer that as kind of like the other part of this particular encouragement to you. Finding the voice of a book early on is a huge asset. Do you have to have the voice before you begin to write? No, you do not. In fact, there's no way you're going to find the voice until you begin to write. So just know that finding the voice is going to be one of those early tasks. Once you find the voice, the writing gets so much easier that I encourage you to at least think about the type of voice. The type of voice that you want. Is it conversational? Is it formal? Are you going to be inventing, some unusual slang? There's a wonderful YA novel called Feed by M.T. Anderson. Those of you who like YA and science fiction would love that. It has a lot of invented slang. It's part of the world building. This is a book that, it has a kind of a sci-fi, wonderfully inventive sci-fi angle to it. So think about what you're aiming for in the voice. Is it going to be pretty straightforward, or you got some fancy stuff going? That's the point of view voice question. You won't solve it without writing something, but I want you to think about it before you begin. Amazing. Okay, here's the big one, though. I said I was going to look at the comments. Let me do that quickly. Up, lots of sharing of understanding. All right, very good. I'm gonna I'm gonna share this just in case anyone needs a soundtrack for these live streams. We have a suggestion from Facebook user. I don't know who you are, but I wholeheartedly agree with having a soundtrack. Whatever inspires you, use it. You guys are really funny. All right. And someone's calling out this encouragement to gather conversations, artifacts, scrapbooks, scenery writing. It is part of living the creative life, 100%. When you undertake the path of an artist in your life, you are usually it's who you are even before you admit it. But just know that you are holding space for all of your fellow humans to see the world more fully. That's your job. So whether you're a painter, a sculptor, a writer, the capacity to use your artist's vision and your artist's heart to see an experience and feel and communicate the truth of being human more fully for your fellow creatures is your job. It's a wonderful one. So honor it. So thank you for highlighting that. Okay, suspense is over. Here's the big thing, the main thing. this is what I really want you to think about a lot before you sit down to write. What is your hero's mission? What's the mission? All right, those of you who've been watching, you've heard me talk about this before. If you don't know what a mission is, think of the thing that your hero sets out to do at the somewhat in the beginning, in the first act, not necessarily on the first page, but by the end of the first act. Your hero has something that they've set out to do. This is not a vague thing. It's not, I want to be a better person, right? It's something like Meg Murray in A Wrinkle in Time saying, I am going to find my father. He's been missing, and I am going to find him. It's something like Dorothy Gale saying, okay, I've somehow ended up in this weird place called Oz, but I'm going to the Emerald City, and I'm going to put myself in front of this wizard that I've been told about because he's apparently the only person who can send me home to Kansas. It's something that has all of that specificity in it, what they are going to do and why. It's something like Bilbo Baggins, after a bit of struggle, accepting this task to travel with a bunch of dwarves to this particular mountain in which lives a dragon who's sitting on their ancestral gold. Bilbo is going to go there. He's going to get to that mountain. He's going to deal with the dragon, and he's going to steal the gold back. We don't know exactly how this is going to happen, but his mission is super clear. So I want you to think about what your hero's mission might be. Will you know it exactly before you sit down to write? Perhaps not, but you might have some sense of it. And whatever that mission is, that is the book that you're writing. You are writing a book that 3/4 of, or more than half of, will involve watching Bilbo Baggins travel to the Lonely Mountain. You are writing a story that more than half of will involve watching Dorothy Gale try to get to the Emerald City and get home to Kansas. Right? That's what the book is going to be. And so when I say know your mission, what I want you to do is not have every bit of it worked out. All of the how is to be discovered, right? All of the tests along the way, all the little obstacles that are going to crop up, even probably most of the characters that your hero will meet along the way, you can invent those as you go. If you're a bit of a pantser at heart, as I am, there's no problem with inventing all of that as you go. But if you get into the scribbling, into the actual manifesting of the book, and you're writing page after page, and you have no idea what mission this hero is going to be set on, you need to take a deep breath and clarify it. And here's why. You can write an entire book, and alas, I have seen it happen. And some of these manuscripts have crossed my desk as a writing coach. When writers have come to me saying, I don't get it. Everyone keeps rejecting my manuscript. What's the matter? And I read it and I say, your hero has no mission. This is 300 pages of somebody wandering around looking for stuff to do. Whoops. You can, if you like to write an entire novel's worth of pages in which your hero meets interesting characters, goes new places, has different experiences, and there still can be no plot. These books are not going to be well received. It is a beginner's mistake, unfortunately. And so what I want you to consider very, very early on in your process is coming up, not with all the details, but one sentence. This is a book in which my hero is going to he's going to end up confronting a dragon and trying to get back the gold. This is a book that she's going to have to go to the wizard. He's the only one who can send her home, or so she thinks. You need that mission. This is a book in which Meg is going to go across the universe with some allies in order to rescue her dad. If you have that one sentence, you are good to go. Start your engines right away. Scribble. Get going on your draft. Because that one sentence, and you should write it on a Post-it note, is the instruction manual for everything that your hero must do in the book. Your hero's trying to do this thing. This is the goal. This is what they are after. Now, those of you who are paying close attention will say to me, but that's not the end of those stories, Mary Rose. That's not the end of The Hobbit. That's not the end of The Wizard of Oz. That's not the end of A Wrinkle in Time. There's a whole thing that happens after that. Yeah, there is. That's the third act. Now, do you need to know everything that happens in the third act before you sit down to begin? No, you do not. And in fact, I will confess to you, in my many years of writing, I have almost made it a practice to not worry too much about the third act when I'm still writing the middle, because the very hallmark of a third act is that it comes as a surprise. Whatever your hero ends up getting to, that scene at the end of the second act, that scene where she's standing in front of the wizard saying, but then you said you could send me home to Kansas. That moment when Bilbo, gets out of the dragon's lair and says, I stole something, or when Meg Murray rescues her father, there's something surprising that's going to happen as a result of that moment. We're going to find out that the wizard is a fake. We're going to find out that that dragon was the only thing preventing all of the other creatures in this world from going to war over that gold. We're gonna discover that in the attempt to rescue Meg Murray's father, that her beloved younger brother Charles Wallace is going to get seized by the villain of that story. Something unexpected is going to happen as a consequence of that scene, and the unexpectedness, you can trust yourself that by the time you get to that scene, the unexpected quality of it may be unexpected to you as well. You may have an idea of what it's going to be, and by the time you get there, you're going to know your story and your main character so well that you might think of something 10 times as good, much fresher, much more surprising and inevitable and, really perfect than you could possibly have thought of before you even began mushing around the wet clay of this narrative. That is something that I feel wholeheartedly you can give yourself permission to discover along the way. But you must have a destination. That destination is what I'm talking about when I say know the mission. Write it on a Post-it note, stick it on your computer screen. Just remember what your hero is trying to accomplish. They are going to have a lot to go through in order to get there. There will be moments in the story where the stakes are raised and unexpected allies come and all kinds of twists and turns. You can pants your way through as much of that as you feel comfortable. If you like to plan ahead, go ahead, write an outline, be my guest. But if you don't know where your hero is going, there's no way to write the journey toward it. So my perhaps unexpected advice is the mission. I'm going to bring up a great question from Nancy. So she's saying, is the mission kind of like the log line? It is kind of like the log line, Nancy. It totally is. Now, I'm not going to say 100% it's the same thing because people define log lines in different ways and use them for different purposes. Sometimes log lines are used in a promotional way, right? In a way to kind of pitch a story quickly. And so sometimes people don't want to be spoilery in the log line. And so that's my one hesitation about that. You need to know. You can't give a spoiler to yourself. You're the author. You need to know what your hero has set out to do, even though unexpected things are going to happen. You have to know, okay, my hero's Harry Potter, and he's going to go to Hogwarts and learn to be a wizard. That's what he's going to do. He's going to go through the entire training. He's going to get through a school year at Hogwarts. Literally every single book and the series involves him getting through that year at Hogwarts. And then the deeper complexities, right? The additional complexities keep piling up in a very inventive and complex world. But we know what's going to happen. We don't sit, we're not getting into the first act of Harry Potter and then into the second act. And we're still like, this kid, he lives with this terrible family. When is something going to happen? No, it happens in the end of the first act. Where's he going? Hogwarts. He's going to learn to be a wizard. Boom. It's very, very clear. Then what happens, can be discovered. So and this is 100% accurate, Nancy. Yes. So the mission takes you to the end of the second act. And in fact, the connection between the mission and what happens at the end of the second act is so precise in a very well-crafted story that I call it the scene you promised the reader, which we can also call the ordeal. But that end of second act scene is a scene that is foretold in quite clear terms, so that your reader knows why they're reading. Your reader is trying to get to that scene that was promised. One of these pages, Meg Murray is going to get to the place where her dad is being held captive, and she's going to see him and she's going to rescue him. We promise the reader that scene at the very end of the first act of that book, and the entire second act takes us to it. And then unexpected things happen, right? So that's what that is. That's very, very, very insightful. So you sort of need to know who your hero is at the beginning of the tale, what needs to change, and you also need to have like a one-sentence version of what is being promised at the end of the second act. That's what I call the mission. Your job then as you draft is to connect those two things. What happens in the third act? I'm okay if you discover that as you go. You will find out along the way so much about the world, the cast, and the incremental change in your hero. The mission, sorry, not the mission, the third act experience, the sort of third act, sort of final phase of their growth and their transformation, they will have grown so much that you might underestimate them when you're conceiving of it prior to writing much of the draft. As you write the draft, your hero is going to continue to grow and change. Don't save stuff, just let them grow and change. Bring them along. That's what the story is supposed to be. By the time you get to the end, your hero is going to be very different. And so you are likely to be able to imagine something much more fresh and rewarding and maybe more challenging. Maybe they're going to have to go further, sacrifice more, be braver than you even thought they were capable of when you first conceived of them. So this sort of leads me to my something I've got a question mark after on my notes here, because sometimes people ask, well, but don't you need to know the theme of the book before you start? And the theme is one of those words that comes up sometimes when we're thinking like readers as opposed to thinking like writers. But the truth is that writers do concern ourselves with theme. Theme might be something that inspired you at the beginning, but if you begin writing a book not knowing what the theme is, you are in good company. You have so much to discover, and I encourage you, and I hope that many of you will become as big nerds about story structure as I am. I cannot tell you how it can really change your writing practice and get you writing the kinds of stories that other people will love, that will just work for your reader. It will save you so much time. It will save you so many rejection letters if you just kind of get on board with writing something that has a really, really impeccable story structure. If you can do that, theme is going to take care of itself, because part of what you're going to be doing is drawing that story from your heart, from your own authentic beliefs, values, observations about how human beings behave, what it means to be human. And your theme is going to emerge. And most of us will discover with experience that we have a few pet themes, that we have emotional and spiritual preoccupations, things that we revisit again and again. And that's a beautiful thing. That's part of finding your voice and maturity as a writer, is to get a sense of what your personal material is. So I do not put theme on the list of things you must know before you begin writing. It's a vaster and more subtle notion than that. Your themes will reveal themselves to you in time, and you too may discover, that you get to the end of writing The Hobbit and realize this book has been about greed all along. That might have been a little bit unconscious, right? But at the end, it will become clear, just as it becomes clear to your hero. So that's something I wanted to address. And the last thing that I want to bring up before I completely conclude my remarks and focus on what you guys have to say and ask is the the one thing, in addition to all of that, that I hope that you will undertake to know and study before you do too much drafting is some sense of story structure. And you'll notice that that's sort of what I've been talking about all along. Who's your hero? What's the matter? What happens to topple the house of cards that they're living in? And what mission do they go on? That's a very easy to say. Just know those things, some quick version of those things before you begin writing, and you'll be good. But those things are story structure. That's story structure. That's a first act and a second act right there. There's more, there's much more nuance, more detail, all of the things that can happen in a first act and a second act. We can continue to dive deep into those. That is what I teach a Path of the Storyteller, is breaking all that down beat by beat with a lot of nuance. But basically, that's what when we talk about those things. How does your hero need to transform? What happens to get the story started that topples that house of cards? What mission do they go on? And then what unexpected consequences of that final ordeal propel your hero into the third act so that their journey of transformation can really be complete? That is story structure. That is hero's journey inspired story structure. So I encourage you to really take seriously that learning that craft of storytelling it's just going to help you so much. As my students have heard me say more than once, when you know story structure, the page is never truly blank because you are coming to it with a vast map of story structure in your mind. You're writing a beginning. You're exploring the original world of your hero. You're exploring what's wrong. Okay, now you're going to, topple the house of cards. Some invitation to adventure might come. Your hero is going to have a threshold guardian response like, I'm not ready to change. If I were ready to change, I wouldn't be stuck in the first place. Maybe some mentorship will come along and help lift them over this sort of mini threshold so that they say, okay, I'm going on the adventure. And now I know what my mission is. And then there's test after test. Like every page of your draft that you sit down and there's nothing on it, that's what's on it. It's like the DNA of the story is there on every page. So there may be no words on the page, but the DNA of story is on the page. And once you're trained to think that way, you're never alone. You're never alone. You've got the whole legacy of human storytelling sitting on your shoulder, like a fond mentor saying, okay, we're going to do this now. It's actually very empowering. Okay. All right, that is what I've got to say about what you must know before you begin. Let's focus on your questions and your thoughts. And this is great discussions going on in here. There is a question, I think, about where to watch the previous videos. Yeah, absolutely. You can make sure this up. Oh, that's the wrong one, but thank you, Facebook user. Right. So you can, if you're not a member of the Path of the Storyteller Facebook group, you can just go over there and join it. And the videos are all living in there. Or if you want a little bit of an easier layout, just find the YouTube channel and just search my name on YouTube, Mary Rose Wood. And so you'll see all of the previous live streams are living on the YouTube channel. They all say what they're about. You can find many hours of happy viewing and study by going through some of those videos. And I hope that you will, because we've really talked about a lot of stuff. And I think, some of the dots of this should start to connect for you guys if you're paying attention. All right. And I know you are. So I'm going to just do a last call for any questions about what you need to know before you begin writing. Very good. Okay. I think we have completed this topic for today. I know there's a lot to think about. And I hope that you will all, if you haven't already begun, I hope that you will feel a little more sure about how to close the gap from where you are right now to getting that work started. And for those of you that are in the middle of a work in progress, and you're thinking, uh-oh, I started writing, but I actually didn't figure out who the hero was, or I didn't decide on a point of view. I have no idea what voice I'm writing in, and I never really chose a mission either. I gently encourage you not to despair, but to use your writing time um, as not so much a feverish desire to get more pages under your belt, but to go back and make sure that what you're writing is adding up to something, that's adding up to a draft that is usable. There's nothing wrong. This will be my closing remark, I think. There's nothing wrong with writing a draft and looking at it and saying, okay, back to the drawing board, or okay, now I know a lot about this character and this world, and I've got a lot of ideas for scenes, but I can see that I still don't really have a story. And using that draft kind of as those sweaters that you buy in order to unravel because you like the wool, right? You're going to unravel it and knit something much more suitable with the same wool. It's okay to write a draft that way. It's fine. It is a time-consuming and tiring way to work. And my experience, again, is, of course, writers are only human, believe it or not. And if we spend a lot of time writing a draft without solving some of these major, questions, and yet we force ourselves to get all the way through it because we don't want to quit, or we're afraid if we stop and go back, we'll never finish. We get all of these forces of resistance that come up. We end up with a draft that is very problematic. And then the desire to revise it or to fix it is overwhelming because it's really a very big job. At a certain point, it's easier to build a new house than it is to renovate an old house that's falling apart and has all kinds of problems, right? You all know this. So some people will say, no, just write a complete draft and then go back and fix it later. But easier said than done. What I'm asking you to do to prepare to write your draft is not hard. Find your hero, find your mission, do enough research about the world so that you can kind of get started with at least the basic details. Choose a point of view that's appropriate before you write too much, because otherwise you're just going to have to go back and start over. And above all, know that mission. Know that mission. If you can get some of that going for yourself before you get too far into writing a draft, you won't get stuck. You're not going to have that crisis of getting 20 pages, 30 pages in and saying, okay, now I don't know what to do. Now I'm stuck. Those are the writers who say, oh, I got writer's block. You didn't get writer's block. You just never picked a mission. That's not the same thing, right? I don't believe in writer's block for a wide range of reasons, but this is the main one. The vast majority of writers who claim that they have it don't have good story structure craft. And so their page is blank. They don't know what to do. They have mistaken putting words on the page, which is the manifestation part. They've mistaken that for the beautiful, energetic butterfly of story that is the thing that we're really trying to capture. Words on a page are just, that's just in newsprint. That's not what it's about. It's this energetic experience that we want to deliver to the reader through the artful use of words on the page. I mean, I love words more than anyone, but they are not the point. They are the materials that we use. So ponder all of that, my friends. And thank you so, so much for coming. I so enjoy these talks. Do catch up with the old videos. You'll find a lot of what I've mentioned briefly here explored in more depth in some of them. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you're watching on YouTube and you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. It would be lovely to have you as a subscriber. And I'm just looking over here to see if anything else has come up. You can also ding the little bell, and this way you'll get notifications when I schedule a new one. You'll know what the topic is and come ready to take notes and participate. I love to hear your suggestions about what to talk about in the future as well. I think some of our best live streams have been suggestions from all of you. So until I see you again, happy writing.